What is echinacea?
Echinacea is a group of flowers, related to daisies, sometimes also called coneflowers. Different members of this group are used in herbal medicines to stimulate the body's immune system. Scientific studies on the effectiveness of echinacea are contradictory, however, as some have shown clear effects in the prevention of or shortening of the length of colds, while others have concluded that it is mostly ineffective.
What is a surfactant?
Surfactants are molecules that reduce the surface tension of a liquid. These are typically amphiphilic organic molecules, which means that they have one hydrophobic and one hydrophilic section. This will cause them to align in a certain way at the surface of a liquid, which interrupts the order of the liquid at the surface, lowering the surface tension.
Why can't I put raw eggs in the freezer?
You can if you take them out of their shells. Raw eggs expand when frozen, which can break the shell, so don't put whole eggs directly into the freezer.
Florey, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his fundamental work, both theoretical and experimental, in the physical chemistry of macromolecules. Florey contributed greatly to polymer science by developing metrics for characterizing polymers and for comparing different polymers against one another. This was a task that had often proved difficult due to the different compositions and conformational arrangements found in different polymers. He made great strides toward putting polymer science on a firm theoretical footing, which was lacking when he entered the field.
What is an antiparticle, and what is antimatter?
For most kinds of particles there is postulated to exist a corresponding antiparticle, which is of the same mass but an opposite charge. These antiparticles have only recently been observed in laboratory settings for the first time, and they are very difficult to isolate and study experimentally. This is because particle and antiparticle pairs collide to generate photons of light in a process that annihilates the particle and antiparticle pair. Antiparticles are not well understood and are an active area of research related to nuclear chemistry. Antimatter is just matter made up of antiparticles, in the same way that normal matter is made up of particles. There has been postulated to be an equal amount of matter and antimatter in the universe, though the observations made to date do not suggest this to be the case. This represents an unresolved dilemma that scientists hope to someday better understand. These types of fundamental, unresolved problems are a big part of the reason science is so interesting.
What is the difference between heterogeneous catalysis and homogeneous catalysis?
Homogeneous catalysis takes place when the catalyst and the other reactants are all dissolved in the same solution. Heterogeneous catalysis typically involves the use of a catalyst that is insoluble, or perhaps only weakly soluble, in the solution in which the reaction takes place. Thus, in heterogeneous catalysis, the catalyst and solution may form a suspension. Or the catalyst may simply be a solid that is placed in the solution.
Do nuclear reactions take place in outer space?
Yes, inside stars. Nuclear reactions occur frequently in stars as hydrogen atoms undergo fusion to produce helium and eventually other heavier elements. Some additional, higher energy nuclear reactions also take place when two neutron stars merge.
What is carbon sequestration?
Carbon sequestration and carbon capture are processes to remove carbon dioxide, CO2, from the atmosphere and store it. This is exactly what plants do when they convert CO2 into other molecules like sugars and proteins. Carbon dioxide can also react with water and limestone, CaCO3, to form calcium bicarbonate. Ca, HCO3, 2, in an inorganic example of natural carbon sequestration. Generally, though, this term is used today to refer to man-made processes for removing CO2 from the atmosphere or for capturing it before it gets released, like from power plants. A number of approaches to long-term carbon dioxide storage are being, or have been, tried, including pumping the gas deep underground into natural rock formations, scrubbing the CO2 out from flue gas by reacting it with bases, or transforming the CO2 into other useful molecules for making polymers, just to name a few.
How can a fire be started with a piece of flint?
Almost everyone has seen a movie character start a fire using a piece of flint. But you may wonder how this is possible. Flint is a hard stone that can produce sparks when it is struck against a metal, such as steel. The sharp edge of the flint breaks off a small splinter of steel, which is heated significantly by the friction from the strike of the flint. As this splinter of hot steel reacts with oxygen in the air, a spark is produced. The sparks generated in this way can then ignite a piece of dry wood, paper, or other fuel.
What is an X-ray?
A form of short-wavelength electromagnetic radiation.
Why did Elias James Corey, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his development of the theory and methodology of organic synthesis. Corey was awarded the Nobel Prize for his numerous important contributions to organic synthesis, including the development of theories and methods that allow for the production of biologically active natural products. This led to many pharmaceuticals becoming commercially available, and thus had a clear impact on the general public health. His research was likely so successful because he developed the principles of a methodology known as retrosynthetic analysis, in which one starts with the structure of the target molecule and analyzes in reverse order what bonds must be broken to generate simpler structures that one can already synthesize readily.
What is an amalgam?
An alloy of mercury.
What is gravimetric analysis?
Gravimetric analysis refers to any method for quantifying the amount of an analyte based on mass. For analytes dissolved in a solution, this may require first reacting the analyte with another species to cause it to precipitate out of the solution. The solid product can then be filtered and weighed, and the mass of the analyte initially dissolved in the solution can be determined. Other situations may require different methods of preparing the analyte in an appropriate form for weighing. But the general idea is always that the composition of the weighed species is known. So it's possible to figure out the mass of the analyte originally present.
What is the boiling point elevation?
A colligative property, the increase in boiling point of a liquid as a solute is added.
Why did Hermann Staudinger, Federal Republic of Germany, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his discoveries in the field of macromolecular chemistry. Staudinger was among the first to propose that macromolecules, polymers, are of significant importance and play an important role in chemistry. These views were not initially well received by many members of his field, but he was able to demonstrate experimental proof of the existence of macromolecules. Today the importance of macromolecules is widely recognized in polymer chemistry, biochemistry, and numerous other fields.
What is astrochemistry?
Astrochemistry is chemistry in space. Astrochemists try to do what all chemists do: study molecules and the reactions of those molecules, except that these chemists are looking in outer space, where temperatures are extremely cold and concentrations are exceptionally dilute. These two properties of outer space combined mean that lots of very strange molecules can exist for a relatively long time.
What is an extensive property?
A property that depends on the amount of a substance present, e.g., size, mass, volume.
So if all polymers are not the same size, what is the weight of a polymer?
Good question. If we know the number of monomers that make up a polymer chain, technical term, degree of polymerization, then the molecular weight of the polymer is the molecular weight of the monomer multiplied by that number of monomers.
How can reactions be run in a solvent-free environment?
There are a few common ways to avoid the use of solvents when running a chemical reaction. The simplest situation is when one of the reagents can serve as the solvent for the reaction. This is commonly referred to as running a reaction neat, yes, like Scotch. Reagents that are not liquids at ambient temperatures can also be used in the molten state so that they can be used as solvents. Some reactions can also be run on solid supported catalysts that do not require a solvent. By avoiding the use of solvents, each of these approaches cuts down on costs and on the amount of waste generated.
What is a lipid?
A biochemical molecule that is hydrophobic or amophilic, e.g., waxes, fats, vitamins A, D, E, K, glycerides, etc.
Why do onions make you cry?
Sulfonylpropene is the main tear-inducing compound. Technical term, lacrimator, released when you slice onions. The most interesting part of this story is that this chemical is not present in onions before you slice them. In fact, the generation of this tear-inducing molecule is not a mistake, but part of the defense system that plants have developed to deter animals from continuing to eat them. When you cut, or an animal takes a bite of, an onion, an enzyme, a lionase, that is normally safely stored within the plant cells is released and starts to wreak havoc. A lionase converts sulfoxides to sulfonyl groups, which makes you cry like a baby.
What is an RNA?
Ribonucleic acid, composed of a chain of nucleotides, encodes genetic information.
What's in toothpaste that makes our teeth cleaner?
If you get your teeth whitened at the dentist or buy some over-the-counter whitening products, the active ingredient is usually hydrogen peroxide. The hydrogen peroxide reacts with the colored molecules that are staining your teeth to remove them or at least make them colorless. This can be a slow reaction, so at the dentist's office, sometimes they use a bright light to speed up the breakdown of the H2O2. If you're wondering about whitening toothpastes, those contain an abrasive compound that simply rubs the stain molecules off of your teeth. No fancy chemistry at all.
Where does all that wax go when I burn a candle?
Why, it burns. The long hydrocarbon chains that make up candle wax are transformed into carbon dioxide and water. Candle wax is the fuel for the flame, the wick just helps draw it up to the flame by capillary action.
What is a nucleophile?
A molecule that donates an electron pair, i.e., a Lewis base, to an electrophile, i.e., a Lewis acid, forming a bond.
What is precipitation?
In chemistry, precipitation means something different from when the weather forecaster on the news predicts rain. A precipitate is a solid substance that does not dissolve in a solution. And precipitation describes the process of the precipitate forming. This generally takes place when one or more soluble reactants in a solution undergo a reaction to form one or more insoluble products. The result is that a solid substance will form in a solution, either depositing on the bottom of the container or sometimes floating around in the solution. Depending on the circumstances, precipitation can be a desirable or undesirable result.
How does fertilizer work?
Fertilizers are used to get elements that plants need into the soil. When the natural environment doesn't provide sufficient quantities, The typical elements are nitrogen, N, phosphorus, P, potassium, K, calcium, Ca, magnesium, Mg, and sulfur, S. They're actually labeled by the elements they contain. Next time you're at a garden store, look for NPK or NPKS on a bag of fertilizer. The numbers after these codes tell you the weight % of these elements in the bag.
Why did Frédéric Joliot, France, and Irene Curie, France, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For their synthesis of new radioactive elements. Frédéric was an assistant of Marie Curie, who ended up marrying Marie's daughter, Irene. The husband and wife team of Joliot and Curie collaborated on experiments. Investigated the effect of bombarding atoms with other particles. Specifically, they struck boron, magnesium, and aluminum atoms with alpha particles. He2+ ions, creating new short-lived radioactive particles.
What are Lewis acids and bases?
The definition of a species as a Lewis acid or a Lewis base is based on whether a species has a tendency to donate its electrons to another species or whether it tends to accept electrons from another species in a chemical reaction. Lewis acids are electron acceptors, while Lewis bases are electron donors. As you can probably guess, Lewis acids tend to react with Lewis bases. Since they each have what the other one is looking for.
What was Agent Orange?
Agent Orange was an herbicide consisting of a mixture of 2,4-dichlorophenoxyacetic acid and 2,4,5-trichlorophenoxyacetic acid used by the U.S. military during the Vietnam War. The intent was to defoliate rural areas of the country, thus removing strategic ground cover and food sources from the rural areas. It was also discovered that the 2,4,5-trichlorophenoxyacetic acid was contaminated with 2,3,7,8 tetrachlorodibenzodioxin, which is an extremely toxic chemical. Agent Orange was sprayed throughout rural areas of southern Vietnam at high concentrations. An average concentration of 13 times what was recommended by the USDA for domestic use, resulting in roughly 20% of southern Vietnam's forests being sprayed. The use of the Agent Orange herbicide resulted in extremely negative health effects for people in these areas. And the effects still persist today despite the Vietnam War having ended in 1975. It is estimated that 1 million people are currently disabled or suffer major health problems as a result of the use of Agent Orange.
What is an addition reaction?
In an addition reaction, two or more molecules combine to make one molecule. This is different than the substitution reactions we have been looking at, where two molecules combine to make two different molecules. The addition of an acid to an alkene is the simplest example. Here, an acid protonates a carbon-carbon double bond. The carbocation that is formed will be the more substituted one of the possible products that could form. The conjugate base of the acid then reacts with this carbocation.
What is a heterogeneous mixture?
A sample containing more than one substance.
What is the pH of an aqueous solution?
The pH of an aqueous solution provides a description of the concentration of H3O and ions, or water molecules that have accepted an extra proton, in the solution. The pH is calculated as the negative logarithm, base 10, of the activity of H3O and ions in solution. A pH near 7 indicates that the solution is nearly neutral, in the sense that this would be the pH of pure water without any acid or base added. A pH value lower than 7 indicates that the solution is at least somewhat acidic, while a pH above 7 indicates the solution is basic.
What does hydrophilic mean?
A molecule that interacts favorably with or is attracted to water, typically via hydrogen bonding or other dipolar interactions.
How can I make Jell-O, that glows under a black light?
Chemistry principles encountered in this experiment: fluorescence gels, cross-linking materials you'll need. Jell-O, or gelatin powder, 1 cup of tonic water, 1 cup of water, stovetop or microwave large bowl pot. For heating on stovetop, a black light source. See Physical and Theoretical Chemistry to review how black lights work. The procedure: heat 1 cup of water to a boil. Mix the Jell-O, and the hot water into the bowl, and stir the powder in until it dissolves. The hot water helps the gelatin to dissolve and disperse evenly throughout the solution. Gelatin is a form of collagen, see Chemistry in the Kitchen, and when it cools, the Jell-O, will reform cross-links between the collagen strands, which is what traps the water inside to create a gel. You'll recall that a gel is solid material that consists of a bonded network of long strand molecules that contain significant amounts of molecules that would otherwise behave as a liquid trapped within the solid network. Add in 1 cup of tonic water, stir the solution well. And then place it in the refrigerator for about 4 hours. The tonic water contains a molecule called quinine that will fluoresce a bright blue color when excited with the appropriate wavelengths of light, which can be provided by the black light. Recall that fluorescence takes place when a molecule absorbs light at one wavelength, relaxes to release a fraction of that energy, and then emits a photon at a longer wavelength, lower energy, than that which was absorbed. Black lights provide light that is at slightly shorter wavelengths, higher energies, than light in the visible spectrum. So it can often excite molecules that will fluoresce in the visible region of the spectrum. When the gel O(R) is finished hardening, take a look at it under the black light. It should glow blue. This is due to the fluorescence of the quinine from the tonic water. This blue glowing color comes from the fluorescence of the quinine molecules. So it will not be affected significantly by the flavor or color of gel O(R) that you decided to use.
What is the difference between a qualitative and a quantitative observation?
Quantitative observations are, as the name suggests, observations that attempt to quantify how much of something there is. Chemists are often interested in measuring concentrations of chemical species. The amount of energy released in a reaction, the lengths of chemical bonds, and numerical values associated with a multitude of other chemical properties. A few examples of measurements an analytical chemist might make are determining how much fat is in a cookie. About 10 grams, how much CO2 is in the air, about 390 ppm, or how much lead is in your drinking water. Hopefully very little. Qualitative observations are observations that tell about a general property of an object, but don't quantify exactly how much of something there is. Typically this means the observation isn't giving a number of something, but rather it is describing a quality of an object. Examples might be that a piece of candy tastes sweet, that the sky is blue, or that a circle is round. Some observations can be tough to classify as strictly qualitative or strictly quantitative. For example, a judge at the Olympic Games may assign a score of 9.5 to a gymnastics performance, indicating that she really liked it. Quantitatively, this allows for a comparison among the different competitors, but it still feels somewhat qualitative since it reflects a judge's opinion and could be influenced by factors like how carefully the judge observed the performance, what elements of a gymnastics routine the judge values the most, or even just by the judge's mood.
What is amorphous?
A solid without a repeating, ordered structure.
Why did Karl Ziegler, Federal Republic of Germany, And Giulio Natta, Italy, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For their discoveries in the field of the chemistry and technology of high polymers. These two great polymer scientists developed several classes of polymers, while simplifying and clarifying the mechanisms of polymerization processes. Ziegler discovered titanium complexes that can catalyze olefin polymerization reactions. And Natta developed a method for the preparation of stereoregular polymers from propylene. At the time, the Nobel Committee recognized that the full implications of their work were likely not yet realized. And indeed, polymer chemistry was still a relatively young field at that date. Today the work of Ziegler and Natta underpins the technology used to generate many of the plastics you encounter.
Why did Robert F. Curl Jr., United States, Sir Harold W. Crotto, United Kingdom, and Richard E. Smalley, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For their discovery of fullerenes. This Nobel Prize was awarded for the discovery of a new form of elemental carbon in which the atoms are arranged in a closed shell to form a ball. These three scientists worked together to make this discovery, and the resulting new form of carbon was known as a fullerene. Fullerenes are generated when carbon vapor, obtained by intense pulsed laser irradiation, condenses in the presence of an inert gas. Fullerenes of a variety of sizes are now known.
What is an angstrom?
A unit of length used often to describe bond lengths. 1A equals 10 to 10 m.
So if the radiation coming from the sun more or less covers all wavelengths of visible light, why aren't plants black?
Let's start with explaining the question a bit more. You can see from the graph on the preceding page that the sun provides light in almost every wavelength. The vast majority of plants, however, appear green, which means they are absorbing blue and red light and reflecting the green light back into your eyeballs. If plants were taking in all the energy the sun is providing, they would appear black, as no light would be reflected.
What is bioremediation?
Bioremediation is an approach to removing pollution from the environment that relies on the use of microorganisms to metabolize pollutants into non-toxic products. Sometimes these microorganisms have been genetically engineered for a specific application. For example, a bacterium called Deinococcus radiodurans has been genetically engineered to digest ionic mercury compounds and toluene from nuclear waste sites. In such cases, bioremediation can often be accomplished by introducing a microorganism at the site of the pollution, thus avoiding the need for physical cleanup and transportation of the waste to a new location.
What is a breeder reactor?
A breeder reactor is a type of nuclear reactor that is capable of generating fissile material. Material that can sustain a chain fission reaction, faster than it uses it up. This is accomplished by using the neutrons given off in the fission reaction to generate additional isotopes capable of fusion. Typically this involves the use of either thorium to generate fissile uranium or uranium to generate fissile plutonium.
Can light move through a vacuum?
Yes. Unlike sound, light is an electromagnetic wave, so no molecules are needed to propagate the wave. But you knew this: the sun's light crosses the vacuum of space to reach Earth each and every day.
So the speed of sound is faster, but why does that make your voice sound weird?
The tone is actually identical, what's different is the timbre. Specifically, the lower frequencies of your voice have less power. So your voice sounds squeaky like a duck.
A part of my brain is called the pons?
Yes. The pons is located in the brainstem, and its function is to move information between the cerebellum and the cerebrum.
What is experimental error?
Experimental error describes the uncertainty or variation in a measurement that is repeated several times. This variation could come from many sources, such as limitations in the quality of the device being used to make the measurement, the ability of the experimenter to accurately repeat the experiment or measurement, or something intrinsic about the quantity being measured.
What is the focus of theoretical chemistry?
Theoretical chemistry is a branch of chemistry that, as the name suggests, develops and applies theories to explain chemical observations and also to make predictions about things chemists cannot directly study by experiment. Theoretical chemists work on a wide variety of problems that cover pretty much all of the other branches of chemistry. Two of the major subfields within theoretical chemistry are electronic structure theory and molecular dynamics.
What is PVC, polyvinyl chloride?
If one of the hydrogen atoms on every ethylene monomer in polyethylene is replaced by a chlorine atom. Note that this is not how this material is actually made. You get PVC, or polyvinyl chloride. It's the third largest volume polymer produced each year behind polyethylene and polypropylene. It is a very tough polymer, so it is used to make pipes and flooring among many other things. PVC can also be softened, technical term, plasticized, by introducing small organic molecules, like phthalates, a benzene ring with two esters. Among other applications, plasticized PVC is used to insulate electric wires and to make your garden hose.
What is a Lewis base?
A molecular that can donate a pair of electrons.
Why did Walter Norman Hayworth, United Kingdom, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For his investigations on carbohydrates and vitamin C, and Paul Karrer, Switzerland. For his investigations on carotenoids, flavins, and vitamins A and B2. Hayworth's work on carbohydrates expanded on that done by Fischer, making significant further progress into understanding the structures of various isomers of monosaccharides and disaccharides. Prior to this work, very little was known about vitamins, carotenoids, and flavins. And these men were the first to uncover the chemical composition of these molecules. In addition to his work with sugars, Hayworth also studied the composition of vitamin C. Karrer shared the prize for his work characterizing the chemical compositions of several carotenoids and flavins, as well as vitamin A and vitamin B2. Knowledge of the chemical compositions of these species provided some of the earliest insights into how they are formed and the roles they play as nutrients in the human body. Prior to their work, little was known regarding the chemistry or reactivity of these species, because their composition was not known.
What is magnetic levitation?
Magnets apply forces on one another, and these forces can be either attractive or repulsive. If they are repulsive, and if the forces balance against the force of gravity in a carefully designed way, then the magnetic forces can be used to make an object levitate. This is put to practical use in high-speed trains, which can hover above the track while moving quickly on a magnetic cushion.
Why do mass spectrometers need a vacuum to operate?
As the ions travel, they must not collide with any other atoms or molecules before they reach the detector. If they collide with anything else, this will change their direction and kinetic energy, which will make detection either unreliable or impossible.
What is volatile?
A substance that easily evaporates at normal temperatures and pressures.
What metals are used as probe agents in biological systems?
Yttrium, technetium, gold, silver, platinum, mercury, and gadolinium are used as probe agents in biological systems.
What is biocatalysis?
Biocatalysis, as the name suggests, involves using enzymes or other natural catalysts to carry out chemical reactions. This tends to work well within the context of green chemistry, since biological reactions are often catalyzed in water at mild temperatures and pH values. Moreover, enzymes are themselves environmentally benign and obtained from natural sources. In addition to these benefits, biocatalyzed reactions typically proceed with high selectivity and specificity, and require relatively few synthetic steps, thus minimizing the amount of unwanted byproducts produced. Some examples of biocatalyzed syntheses are those of penicillins, cephalosporins. Another class of antibiotics, and pregabalin, a drug to relieve pain from damaged nerves. The use of biocatalysis is gaining popularity as the necessary technology becomes more readily available and as more people realize the benefits of this approach.
What is a semi-metal?
An element, compound, or alloy that has metallic and nonmetallic properties, also known as metalloid.
What is an electron?
Fundamental particle with a negative electric charge.
What makes oil more slippery than water?
The purpose of lubricants, like motor oil, is to reduce the friction between surfaces, so that parts last longer and less energy can be expended in the process of moving them. The key to a good lubricant is that the characteristic length scale for the formation of a thin film of the lubricant must be much smaller than the characteristic length scale of movement in the application. Basically, oils are good lubricants because they can form very thin films that persist even when the parts they serve to lubricate are constantly in motion. This ability to form thin films typically correlates with other properties that are easier to recognize. For example, good lubricants often have a high boiling point, low freezing point, high viscosity, and are stable toward chemical oxidation and changes in temperature.
What is quantum mechanics?
Quantum mechanics is a branch of physics that is needed to provide an accurate description of objects with very small mass, such as electrons. It does so using an approach that describes matter as being both similar to a particle and similar to a wave. The description of a particle in quantum mechanics is contained in something called a wave function, which can be related to the probability of an object being in any of its possible states. One interesting and counterintuitive thing we learn from quantum mechanics is that for particles with very small mass, the position, velocity, and other quantities defining the state of the particle cannot all be precisely specified at the same time. The wave-like description offered by quantum mechanics is needed to explain why molecules have discrete energy levels, along with many other experimental observations from physical chemistry that are inconsistent with classical mechanics.
What is an orbital?
An atomic orbital with an angular momentum quantum number of 1, shaped like a peanut.
How do mirrors reflect light so well?
Most modern mirrors are made of smooth layers of silver or aluminum, along with other chemicals and coatings to aid in their construction. While the chemical properties of silver play some role in reflecting light, the fact that these layers are very, very smooth is more important here. If the surface of the silver layer were rough, the light would be reflected in a variety of different angles, which you would see as a distorted image. When the surface is perfectly smooth, the light bounces straight back into your eye and you see an accurate reflection of the object. This is why you can see clear reflections in very still water or a shiny piece of leather. Both are smooth surfaces.
What elements are in our food?
Our food is made up of pretty much the same elements that we are. Which makes sense because at some point, the elements in our food literally become the elements in our bodies. We are what we eat.
What's the difference between saturated and unsaturated fats?
The terms saturated and unsaturated refer directly to the chemistry definition of unsaturation. Unsaturated fats contain carbon-carbon double bonds, units of unsaturation. While saturated fats have only completely saturated carbon chains. Saturated fats, like butter and lard, stack together well in the solid state. So they are generally solid at room temperature. The double bonds in unsaturated fats disrupt this lattice in the solid state, making these types of fats, like olive oil and vegetable oil, liquid at room temperature.
What is kinetics?
The rate of chemical reactions or processes.
What is an electrophile?
Electrophiles are species that accept electrons, from a nucleophile, in a chemical reaction. Usually, electrophiles have either a full or partial positive charge. Or in some cases, like BH3, have an unfilled octet of electrons.
What is snake venom?
Most venoms are mixtures of dozens of compounds. And the active toxic ingredients are proteins that wreak havoc on the recipient in a variety of ways. While the exact enzymes vary from species to species, and even geographically within a species. Many snake venoms contain some sort of neurotoxins which block signals sent through your nervous system, leading to numbness or even paralysis.
What does that mean?
Superimposable means one object can be placed over another, or less technically, that they're identical. So enantiomers are not identical, but they are mirror images. Take a look at your hands, they are enantiomers. If you put one hand up to a mirror, it looks like your other hand, so they are mirror images. But if you try to put one hand on top of your other, no, not palm to palm. That's cheating. You see, they're not identical, therefore non-superimposable.
What is volume?
The quantity of space that a substance occupies.
What is an ideal gas?
An ideal gas is a collection of atoms or molecules that do not interact with one another and occupy essentially no volume. While this is an idealized model, it turns out to describe many gases very well. The reason it works so well is that the atoms or molecules making up a gas are spread out far from one another, so that the intermolecular forces between them are extremely weak, they don't feel each other. This description leads to the ideal gas law, which is a relationship between the pressure, volume, and temperature of a gas. The ideal gas law allows chemists to predict how, for example, the volume of a gas will change as its temperature is increased. The equation for the ideal gas law is PV equals NkBT, where P is pressure, V is volume, N is the number of particles, atoms or molecules, T is temperature, and Kb is Boltzmann's constant, a fundamental physical constant.
What is the Grignard reaction?
The Grignard reaction is one of the most well-known and powerful reactions in organometallic synthesis, primarily due to its ability to readily form new carbon-carbon bonds. In this reaction, a Grignard reagent reacts by adding to a carbonyl functional group of an aldehyde or ketone and forms a new carbon-carbon bond at the carbonyl carbon. Grignard reagents, which are organometallic species that carry out the Grignard reaction, are typically formed by adding magnesium metal to an alkyl or aryl halide, R1Br in the scheme below. The discovery of this important reaction was awarded with the Nobel Prize in 1912, and the reaction is actually also named after the French chemist François-Auguste Victor Grignard, who discovered it.
What is an element?
An element is the most basic form of a chemical substance. If you have an object made of a pure element, all of its atoms have the same number of protons. We'll discuss what this is more a little later, and the same basic chemical properties. There are not many objects that we encounter on a daily basis that are actually composed of only a single element. Most things are formed from atoms of several types of elements bonded together.
What is a supercritical fluid?
Above its critical point, a given temperature and pressure combination, a substance behaves like both a liquid and a gas and is called supercritical. Supercritical fluids are very good solvents, like liquids, and as a result many modern chemical processes use them.
What is an analyte?
An analyte is simply the chemical species whose properties we are trying to measure in an analytical chemistry experiment. Most often, analytical chemists are interested in measuring the concentration of an analyte present in a sample. The measurement of an analyte concentration is a quantitative observation.
What is the crystal field theory?
A model used to describe the electronic structure of transition metal molecules, particularly the energy of the d orbitals.
What is a black hole?
A black hole is a region of space where the gravitational pull is so strong that nothing, including light, can escape. The size of the black hole is sometimes described by an imaginary surface called the event horizon, beyond which nothing will be able to escape the gravitational pull.
Weight-absorbent polymers are also used to chill drinks? How does that work?
If you stuff a cup holder with absorbent polymer and then soak it in water, the polymer will obviously swell up. The water will slowly evaporate out of the polymer, which reduces the temperature of the polymer gel and ultimately your drink.
Why did William S. Knowles, United States, and Ryoji Wairi, Japan, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For their work on chirally catalyzed hydrogenation reactions NK. Barry Sharpless, United States, for his work on chirally catalyzed oxidation reactions. Half of this prize was awarded to Knowles and Noyori for their work with chiral catalysts that chirally catalyzed hydrogenation reactions, or reactions in which two hydrogen atoms are added. This work found applications in pharmaceutical production soon after its discovery. Sharpless was awarded the other half of this prize for developing chiral catalysts to carry out oxidation reactions, which represent another important class of reactions in organic synthesis.
Is mass conserved during a fission process?
Almost, but not quite. A small amount of mass is given off in the form of energy. Specifically, the relationship between the amount of energy, E, released and the amount of mass, M, that becomes energy is given by the famous relationship E equals mc2, where c is the speed of light.
What is a unimolecular reaction?
A unimolecular reaction involves only a single reactant molecule undergoing a chemical reaction to form products. One possible outcome is that the bonds rearrange within a single molecule to form only one product molecule. While another possibility is that the reactant molecule will fragment, producing multiple product molecules.
What is the Krebs cycle?
The Krebs cycle, also known as the citric acid cycle or the tricarboxylic acid cycle, is a biochemical process through which organisms can generate energy, in the form of ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, by oxidizing acetate that comes from other biomolecules, sugars, fats, and proteins. Since it uses oxygen, it is called an aerobic process. The Krebs cycle also generates other molecules, such as NADH, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, that are used in other biochemical processes. The names citric acid cycle and tricarboxylic acid cycle come from the fact that citric acid is used up and then regenerated in the reactions in the cycle. The name Krebs cycle is named after Hans Adolf Krebs, who was one of its discoverers.
Why did Aaron C. Chanover, Israel, Avram Hershko, Israel, and Erwin Rose, United States, win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry?
For the discovery of ubiquitin-mediated protein degradation. While the overwhelming majority of biochemical research on proteins has focused on how they are synthesized and how they function, these three researchers took a unique path and studied how cells regulate their breakdown. They discovered that proteins are broken down and rebuilt at a much faster rate than anyone probably would have expected. Proteins are labeled when it is time for them to be broken down, and then they are chopped up into small pieces so that they no longer function.
What is a chiral center?
An atom whose arrangement of substituents is non-superimposable with its mirror image.
What makes metals good conductors?
An electrical current is the movement of electrons. So a conductive material allows the free movement of electrons. Metals are good conductors of electricity because of their electronic structure. There are basically two big groups of orbitals in metals: the valence band and the conduction band. The valence band is the group of orbitals that are normally filled in a metal, while the conduction band is empty. These are called bands because they are made up of sets of closely spaced energy levels. Metals, and other good conductors of electricity, can have very small or no band gaps at all. Semiconductors have small band gaps. and electrons can be promoted from the valence band to the conduction band either by heat or light. Insulators, materials that do not conduct electricity, have large band gaps.
What is a racemic mixture?
A racemic mixture contains equal amounts of both enantiomers of a molecule.
How does a battery work?
Batteries operate based on chemical redox reactions that are set up to cause the spontaneous flow of electrons through the object you want to power.
What is a gram?
One slash 1000 of a kilogram, which is the standard unit for mass.
What is typically analyzed when a doctor takes your blood sample?
There are actually several types of blood tests that your doctor may perform, depending on your symptoms and what they are looking for. These include tests to look at your blood chemistry, the enzymes present in your blood. Tests of how well your blood is able to form a clot, tests to assess risk for heart disease, or a complete blood count. A complete blood count can detect the presence of many diseases and immune system disorders by measuring the numbers of red and white blood cells, platelets, blood cell fragments that promote clotting. Hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen, hematocrit, the amount of space taken up by red blood cells. And mean corpuscular volume, a measure of the size of red blood cells. Blood chemistry tests provide information about the health of your muscles, bones, and organs. This test reports blood glucose, calcium, and electrolyte levels. It will also test the function of your kidneys. This is often a test that requires you to not eat any food for some length of time before the test so that the doctor can get an accurate measure of your blood chemistry that is not influenced too heavily by what you have eaten recently. Blood tests to assess heart disease focus on measuring your cholesterol levels. This includes low-density lipoproteins, LDLs, often called bad cholesterol, high-density lipoproteins, HDLs, often called good cholesterol, and triglycerides, a type of fat. This test also typically requires you to not eat for about half a day prior to having your blood taken, as your cholesterol levels can be easily influenced by what you have recently had to eat. While blood tests typically cannot diagnose diseases themselves, they can provide a strong indication of what disease you may have and direct your physician to provide other tests that can confirm a diagnosis.